The Brussels-based International Crisis Group has published a new report that warns of a high probability of a new round of conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and provides a number of recommendations on what can be done to avert another catastrophic war. The authors of the report put a lot of focus on the civilian observation mission that the EU agreed to deploy to Armenia last week. The mission will last for 2 years. Mention is also given to a proposal to send observers from the OSCE, a major regional security organization, to Armenia. A long-term OSCE mission garnered French and American support as it would bring together the major European powers and the US under a single umbrella, but Baku opposed the idea. French officials told the crisis group they believed that the involvement of the OSCE would not antagonize Russia in the way the EU mission already has. A French diplomatic source also told the crisis group that Moscow's concerns about the EU mission could have adverse effects for Armenia. According to the diplomat, quote, "A weak Armenia will have to face challenges alone." US officials, for their part, sought ways to ensure broad international involvement while avoiding a direct role for their country. The report notes that EU diplomats had started preliminary talks with Azerbaijani officials regarding the monitoring mission, but these were disrupted by the ongoing crisis over the blockade of Nagorno-Karabakh. An EU diplomat involved in the negotiations told the crisis group that there is an expectation for Brussels to pressure Baku to remove the blockade, but that will also make it more difficult for the EU to soften Azerbaijan's position on the monitoring mission. According to the report, resistance at home is also a problem for the EU. Some European officials told the crisis group that the EU should focus its resources on the Ukrainian war effort and not elsewhere. Others questioned whether the EU should deploy observers to Armenia, a country that is Russia's military ally. A European diplomat told the crisis group, quote, "The EU, moreover, does not want to alienate Azerbaijan, which is a major energy exporter for the European countries, which are still reeling from the cutting of energy ties with Russia." Crisis group experts noted that even if there is no eruption of full-scale war between Armenia and Azerbaijan, further fighting in border areas will worsen the geopolitical climate in the region and bring misery to residents. They furthermore noted that due to worsening relations between the West and Russia over the war in Ukraine, the major powers should invest extra effort to manage the risk of renewed hostilities in the region. In that respect, the EU's deployment of a 2-year mission was welcomed by the crisis group. This has taken careful maneuvering in Brussels due to Armenia's formal military alliance with Russia and Azerbaijan's gas deals with the EU. The EU mission, they concluded, seems to be the best chance to minimize the risk of more fighting. The crisis group recommends that Brussels should try to gain Baku's permission to deploy observers on the Azerbaijani side of the border. At the moment, observers are only deployed on the Armenian side. Moreover, arrangements should be made with the Russian border guards already on the Armenian side of the border, following the example of other cases where EU observers and Russian personnel work closely together, like Georgia. Finally, the EU should ensure that the mission has the necessary mandate and resources, including broad powers to promote communication and cooperation, both between the two sides and in places along the border. Moscow may not welcome the mission with open arms, but its interests in the South Caucasus coincide with those of Brussels, at least in terms of conflict prevention. For the EU, success in helping to stabilize the South Caucasus would bring economic benefits, easing energy challenges with regard to Azerbaijan, and lowering the chances for another war in the neighborhood. These diplomatic efforts, however, will be for naught if the parties continue to clash militarily. Now the EU must provide this mission with the mandate, diplomatic support, and resources that will allow it to succeed.